Welcome to Beyond the Suit, the podcast that aims to push the current boundaries and conventional thoughts of those working in the legal industry and look beyond the suit, brought to you by Fintelligent. I'm your host, Zac Green, and across the podcast, I'll be speaking to legal professionals from all levels and backgrounds, opening a new door for insight into the legal world. You can expect conversations from inspirational people that aim to advise and offer insight on the lighter side of the industry, from pointers on progression and words of wisdom to funny stories that break the stereotype. Let's look beyond the suit. Welcome everyone on a lovely day to another episode of Beyond the Suit. Today we have a very special episode and certainly a very special guest, a former lawyer nonetheless, and now he is got the unique opportunity to be head of recruitment at the wonderful Keystone Law. Please welcome and introduce Mark Machray. How are you?
Thank you, Zac. Very hot, as it happens.
I know. What a day for a podcast.
Indeed. I'm sure your viewers obviously can't see the weather outside, but I think it's the hottest day of the year in September.
Yeah, I think looking at us, they can just probably feel how hot it is. Just we've got the aircon now, but we've just been getting here. It's been a bit of a nightmare.
I was going to wear a suit, but then I remembered the name of your podcast, so I thought I'd wear something a little bit cooler than that.
A bit more casual. Well, I've seen that you do like a bit of gardening, so it's the perfect weather for it.
Don't talk to me about my garden.
Is it not?
I'm afraid I've lost control of the garden.
Is that just sort of? I mean, we've still got a few days left of summer, clearly. So, any plans to get back out?
The summer holidays, the weather was terrible. The gardens, they bloom beautifully in June, and then they start to wither and wilt away, and the enthusiasm tends to wither and wilt away with it. So there's a lot of work of clearing and chopping and basic sort of clearing for the autumn. But, anyway, I could talk about gardening all day. So
if this is a gardening podcast, well, I guess to move on, it'd be useful to let everyone know, obviously, after introducing you, just what your current position is and what that sort of entails, really.
Yes, of course. Well, actually, my title at Keystone is Director of Growth and Development, but a rather grandiose title, perhaps, for the person in charge of bringing new lawyers to the firm. And I've been doing that for, about 10 years now. I joined the firm as a lawyer and then moved into the management team. But my role is really to bring in wonderful new lawyers to the firm and help them, once they join us, to settle in, get to know colleagues, help them build their, partnership of Keystone colleagues and help people get to know one another, which is a wonderful job. And I think when I explain what I do to lots of people, they are enormously envious. It involves not only lots of meetings with great people, but it involves lots of good lunches with great people and drinks parties and golf days and the like, which is all good stuff.
I mean, you certainly seem to be doing quite a good job of recruiting people now that you've opened a new office in Manchester. So that's showing that the growth. So massive congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That opening of the office, obviously moving away from London, what does that sort of show about, the attractiveness of the firm and how that's growing?
I suppose it sort of demonstrates the increasing reach of the firm in the north of England. I guess we've always been rather London-centric. And the vast majority of our lawyers have joined us or do join us from London law firms and are based either in London or around the southeast. We've always had a good number down in the southwest, and we opened up, not so much an office, but meeting rooms and hot desks in Bristol a few years ago. And having started to recruit more and more lawyers in the northwest, it seemed like an appropriate time to open up an office up there to give them a place to congregate, meet with clients, and a bit of a base. So I suppose what it demonstrates is that Keystone is extending beyond London and the southeast, and increasingly more and more lawyers are hearing about Keystone, understanding what we do, and are drawn to the firm right across the whole of the UK.
Do you think now that you've opened Manchester, any plans for looking globally at all?
Well,
a bit too soon.
Global
maybe.
domination, of course, is on every
everywhere,
growing business's radar. But no, actually, I mean, we've had a sort of sister company in Australia for a good number of years now, and their growth is accelerating, I believe. Obviously, the model was new to Australia when they set up, and so obviously changing things in an industry that has been structured the same way for centuries isn't something that happens overnight, as was our experience when we set up in the UK in 2002. So Australia got going, as I say, about 10 years ago, and seems to be building good momentum out there. And we've had other forays too, but international expansion comes with some challenges and difficulties. And I think really, certainly for the time being, there's an enormous amount of growth to be had in this country. Whilst we are now quite a big firm, we're somewhere in the region of 400 consultants, I think our feeling is we're only really just getting going.
Do you think now that we're in a bit of a post-COVID world, do you think COVID certainly changed some attitudes towards sort of Keystone? You know, obviously you're perceived a bit more now, hence why you've opened in Manchester, having success in Australia maybe, whereas impacted other businesses, it certainly aided you.
Yes, it's interesting how COVID affected Keystone. Of course, to our great advantage, it showed the entire legal industry that you can work remotely. And you can work very effectively remotely. And in no way is it detrimental to your ability to work with your colleagues. And in no way is it detrimental to the level of service you can provide to your clients. So showing all lawyers that actually working remotely, which I don't know if your viewers are familiar with the Keystone model, but that is certainly one of the aspects of Keystone. Our lawyers have always worked remotely. Showing the whole legal industry that was possible, of course, worked hugely to our advantage. I suppose what worked less to our advantage is the fact that lots of law firms since COVID have adopted or been more sympathetic to their lawyers working remotely. What's interesting to see is that seems to be changing as we move further and further beyond the pandemic. I certainly get a sense that more and more firms are either insisting or certainly encouraging their lawyers to come back into the office, which of course is great for us, of course, because those lawyers haven't forgotten how much they enjoyed working remotely and the abilities to work as they did and perhaps enjoy a slightly better work-life balance as a result. And as such, I guess more and more are coming to talk to us because they want to carry on working in the way they've got used to.
You mentioned obviously Keystone's always been about the flexible working, but was that still the case when you joined the firm, and how's that sort of changed over time in terms of attitude to working from home?
It's always been the same. I mean, Keystone hasn't changed. Its basic business model hasn't changed at all since the day I joined as a lawyer in 2010, I think it was. Yes, so it hasn't changed in the least, and I always find it interesting that the word flexibility and remote working seemed to be conjoined, as if one is exclusively the byproduct of the other. When we talk about flexibility and the Keystone model, which offers lawyers that, we talk about the ability to work wherever you want. But the business model that we operate, and our lawyers are self-employed consultants who engage with Keystone, the flexibility we offer them extends far beyond that. Flexibility, not just in terms of where you want, but when you want and with whom you want, and to be able to work with your clients on terms that suit you and your client rather than having to conform to what management dictates and tells you to do. So it's flexibility in all its forms. And I suppose going back to the point on COVID, everybody kept pointing to the fact that Keystone offers flexibility and kept saying enables lawyers to be able to work remotely. But, you know, our frustration was that that's only part of it. And actually what Keystone offers its lawyers is far more than that.
Definitely. I mean, taking it now even further back, before Keystone, before everything, when you're at university, understand you before law even had a bit of a medical background and weren't really interested into diving into the legal sector. So what was your attitude towards law then, and how did that sort of change and encouraged you to get involved in it?
Yeah, well, I come from a very medical family, and I think there are some legal families and medical families and finance families, and I think what tends to happen is you're sort of blinded by your parents' careers and friends of your parents who are also typically medics. And I don't know, perhaps I just didn't have the imagination. It seemed that I was destined to become a doctor, although my father, who was a doctor, was very set against it and didn't see that I had any of the qualities required to be a doctor. But I pursued it nonetheless. And actually, I studied physiology, of all things, at university, not getting the grades to be a doctor. So I suppose my ambition in that regard was cut short at A-levels. Nevertheless, I left university, and not knowing quite what to do, I ended up working for a pharmaceutical company, selling drugs for a living. Which
hope legally.
I always say that with a little wry smile on my face. No, they were anesthetics, and I was a traveling salesman for about. I lasted about 9 months before I realised it wasn't necessarily for me, and I gave another go at becoming a doctor. And I phoned up some medical schools and said, "Well, I've got a degree in physiology. Can I skip a couple of years?" And 2 or 3 of them that I spoke to said, "No, you'll have to retake your A-levels." And I thought, well, I wasn't prepared to do that. And given that would take, 6 years or so to become a qualified doctor, instead what I do is I go to law school, do my training contract, do 2 years as a qualified lawyer. And then the ambition was to become a hugely successful entrepreneur. So anyway, I did all that. I got a training contract with a small firm in the West End and found myself rather enjoying it. And after 2 years of qualification, had lost the ambition to be a hugely successful entrepreneur and instead thought I'd be a hugely successful lawyer. And in truth, neither of those things have come to pass.
So in terms of that, it seems also not forced into it really, but you kind of just chose it as another option, whereas a lot of people kind of get into it quite young. Is there anything you could take from maybe your skills that you learned trying to become a doctor and put it into the legal side of things?
Well, I wouldn't say I learned anything trying to be a doctor because, of course, I never really got very far on that. What I would say is that I learned a lot being a salesman. I know I was only on the road for 9 months, and it's pretty brutal, knocking on doors and trying to persuade people to purchase a brand new drug that's just come on the market when the old drug is perfectly good and the new drug costs twice as much. And I remember having pharmacists harangue me about the fact that I was tempting their doctors with this new product. It was an extraordinary sort of learning experience. I don't think I appreciated it at the time, but the ability to deal with people, be able to convey your message, being able to sell an idea, or in my case, a product, was invaluable, really, in terms of one's future career, whatever career it happened to be. And for becoming a lawyer, it was very important to be able to win new business, to go into environments where you didn't know anybody and make introductions and explain who you were and what you could do for them. And at the end of the day, getting instructions from somebody you had met and had built a relationship with was one of the most rewarding things for me of being a lawyer. So that learning experience through that period of being a salesman, I think was a wonderful thing for developing new business. And now, not so much. Obviously, I'm not really generating business as a lawyer, but I am trying to extol the virtues of Keystone and persuade those that might be unsure about how the model might work for them, that it will work for them. And that comes from a way of being able to pitch the Keystone proposition to lawyers that I meet. So again, a part of a sort of skill set that I learned there.
I mean, obviously, for yourself, it was a really good experience and very, very valuable for you to get those extra skills. But for maybe other legal professionals who didn't sort of get that opportunity to really hone in their sales technique or any techniques really, how important do you think it should be for maybe more so junior lawyers to sort of take some classes on speaking or sales? Do you think that would really help going forward?
I think that having the ability to develop your own practice is fundamental to you as a lawyer. And forgive me, I never worked in the big, massive city firms where perhaps it's less important. You're part of a machine. The firm has an outstanding reputation. It wins massive mandates on the back of that, and the lawyers who are there are dealing with that work. And perhaps they are not necessarily having to pitch for new business and win new business, but step out of that top 10 US firm environment and come back into the sort of mid-market firms or smaller firms. The ability to have your own clients, build your own relationships, at the end of the day, it gives you currency. It gives you currency in the market in which you are operating. If you ever want to move firms, being able to say to that new employer, or in our case, to say to Keystone, I have a book of business, makes you an interesting proposition. There are so many lawyers out there who are great lawyers. What distinguishes one from another, what makes one unique, is their relationships and their networks and their ability to generate and build business. So I would absolutely say to any young junior lawyer, get your head down and do the work, but always think about building relationship right from the get-go. The people you know now are in time going to become more senior in their organizations. If you build that relationship now, those people in however many years will become your clients. And if you have a book of business, you have something to trade, you have currency.
Using the ability to network and obviously, just kind of liaise with lots of different people, was it that brought you to hearing about Keystone Law, and what were your first thoughts about the firm once you'd heard?
Well, it's an interesting story. I mean, I actually joined Keystone with a great mate of mine. We've been trainees together in the firm that we trained at in the West End, and we had some difficult times. It was in the financial crash. We were partners in that firm, so we had already enjoyed a reasonable amount of autonomy and ownership. And we spent a bit of time as employees, which neither of us much liked. And we were thinking about what we might do next. And actually, it was my mate Ed who discovered Keystone and what Keystone offered. We were actually thinking about setting up on our own, even though we were only about 8 or 9 years qualified, but we thought we could do it. And he found Keystone, and my first impression was this sounds too good to be true. Anyway, so we both had, we'd been able to establish some business, and we thought that it seemed like a very good option for us. And we joined the firm, as I say, back in 2010, and neither of us ever looked back.
And was that where obviously you kind of transitioned out from being a lawyer into the role you are now? I mean, talk to me about the process of that, and sort of, was that your idea to do that?
No, not at all. Total serendipity. I mean, you'll probably get an impression talking to me that my career was never one that I had given too much thought to. And it probably contrasts with the vast majority of the people who might watch this, who I'm sure are far more focused on where they want to be when. And moving into the management of Keystone wasn't something I'd ever really thought about doing. And it was only when James Knight, who is the founder of Keystone and still its CEO, asked me whether I might be interested in doing that, that I thought that was a very, very good option. I mean, Ed and I had been working together as a team within Keystone for a couple of years. And I'd always loved winning work. I'd always loved the networking. I'd always loved the social side, getting to know people. And I think I was good at building client relationships. But when the client said, well, I've got a deal coming in, I've got some investment, can you help me draft the investment agreement and articles of association? My heart sunk at the prospect of having to get the documents out and mark them up and send them on and get the deal done. Mm-hmm. So I love the winning of the work. I love the pitch. I found the process of dealing with the transaction less enjoyable. And so when James invited me to come into the firm and help with the management side of things, and that was going to be, I was going to carry on doing some fee earning work, but with a focus on the recruitment piece and other elements as well. And I, this was in 2012, and you could see this extraordinary opportunity. And the potential of Keystone back then was to my mind completely obvious, and therefore I grabbed that offer with both hands, and of course I'm so glad that I did.
What are some of the similarities and differences in your role now as opposed to 10 or so years ago?
Well, I mean, when I first started in the management team, do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I joined, I think I was the 13th member of the management team, of the central office team, as we call them. Those are all the individuals that were supporting the lawyers working remotely.
Sounds quite an unlucky number to be in the
I never really
team.
thought about that, but thanks very much. Yeah. True. No, so we were small. I can't remember what the turnover of the business was back then, but it wasn't huge. And today, we're, I think, somewhere around 90 people in the central office team, with several different teams supporting the lawyers in different areas, whether it be IT, compliance, marketing, finance, admin support, so on. There's a lot of us now. And so I suppose part of the challenge is running those teams efficiently and effectively and making sure they're doing what they need to do. Those teams are much bigger, and therefore the challenges of doing that are greater. In terms of recruiting lawyers, I guess it's not changed much, other than the fact that the lawyers who come on board today tend to come on board with much bigger businesses than they did 10 years ago. And that's testament, I suppose, to where Keystone has got to in the market, and drawing to it people that wouldn't have looked at Keystone 10 years ago. We've become much more mainstream. I don't know if you know that we won the Lawyer Award for Best Law Firm a couple of years ago, which was a surprise to us, but a great one. But it indicates the fact that we were moving more and more into the mainstream. And so lawyers with very large practices are looking to move to Keystone. And of course, that transition is far more complicated than transitioning lawyers with smaller practices that looked after just themselves. These lawyers with bigger practice need teams around them, teams of juniors to support them. So sometimes they're bringing juniors with them. We're helping them employ juniors when they come across. And we employ a load of juniors ourselves to look after them and help them through that transition phase and beyond, when they need some support from time to time rather than permanently. So, the recruitment process is far more detailed than it was back then. And the central office team is far larger, and therefore the challenges of managing that team are greater too. But I think we've achieved growth with great success, and we're very proud of the growth, and it's all about managing that growth effectively, which I think we've done.
I mean, as you mentioned, the growth's very exceptional. Obviously, you're certainly becoming more of an attractive prospect. The main focus, getting more the senior lawyers, giving the work-life balance. But as you grow, do you think focus is going to shift more so on attracting more junior lawyers when you become potentially global or open up a few more offices?
Yes, I think there's no doubt. The way our lawyers engage with us, up until maybe 5 years ago, they were coming on their own. Maybe it was a bit longer ago than that. And now more and more our lawyers are coming as a team or joining us and looking to build a team while they're with us. So whilst back in the day, Keystone was about individual lawyers coming to the firm and working with one another through the firm. Now it's a mixture of individual lawyers and teams of lawyers. And I think that is only going to accelerate, such that more and more we're going to be getting teams of lawyers with us, coming to us. And I think the lawyers that come with us will be looking to develop those teams. And obviously those teams require the recruitment of junior lawyers. And so, yes, undoubtedly, we're going to be recruiting more and more junior lawyers, either directly to support them. I should say that Keystone employs some of those junior lawyers, but more and more often, our lawyers themselves are employing junior lawyers to support their practice. So they're sort of developing their own business within the firm.
Would it be fair to say now that your sales techniques are more important than ever now that you're in the recruitment space?
Yeah, it's always been important. But yeah, I mean, it's helping those people who, when they come to Keystone, quite often have misconceptions as to what the firm offers, and blasting through those misconceptions and reassuring them that whoever they are, whatever the size of their business, the firm can look after them, and that they can operate just as effectively, if not more so, through Keystone than they were operating through their previous firms. So it's a process of reassurance in many ways, to explain how the business model can look after the lawyers that are interested in the firm. And I suppose lawyers with bigger practices need greater reassurance that they'll be able to transport that businesses in its entirety to Keystone.
Well, I think definitely now with your role beyond the sales is the ability to sort of share the information about the firm, and definitely I guess you spend a lot of your time talking about Keystone, which is obviously great for this show, as you kind of know what to say. Anything I throw at you, hopefully you'll have the answers.
There aren't many questions I've been asked about Keystone which I haven't heard before, and hopefully I can answer them all.
Well, one question may not. You might have not phrased in this way, but if I were to be an alien from outer space coming onto this planet and maybe looking to become a lawyer, but have never heard of Keystone Law, how would you explain the structure of the firm to that said alien?
Well, I think the first question I'd ask the alien is, are you entrepreneurial?
Yeah.
Because if he's not entrepreneurial, E.T., then perhaps Keystone won't be the right place for him.
I don't know. Let's just say he's England and Wales qualified, as I don't think...
Okay, well, he'll be unique in that regard. But let's. So, I mean, I suppose I would pitch Keystone to him as a firm which is designed to give him two things. Well, first of all, assuming he has a portable practice, or at least looking to develop one. So we'll have to go with that and assume he's got lots of mates on Mars that want to instruct him. I would say to him, look, this is a great firm for people who have a book of business, and it offers two things to you. The first thing is it offers effectively a wraparound law firm. So he doesn't have to go to the law society and set up his own firm. Everything he needs to be able to run his practice and operate effectively, Keystone provides. And as I've touched upon earlier when talking about the teams we have, it's marketing support, it's IT support, it's compliance, it's meeting rooms, it's PI insurance. Effectively he just plugs in and off he goes. He's got a law firm wrapped around him. So I talk about Keystone offering the nuts and bolts of a firm. But I also like to point out that the way we support our lawyers is different to the way conventional law firms support their lawyers. Yes, Keystone is a law firm, but we're really in the business of looking after lawyers. Our business will succeed and fail by how well we do that, and we're very conscious of that. Our lawyers join Keystone, but they could leave tomorrow. There's nothing tying them in. Conventional firms might ask for capital contributions. They might impose onerous restrictive covenants, long notice periods. They don't like lawyers leaving, and they'll try everything to stop them from going. And of course, that builds up some complacency in terms of how you look after your lawyers. If you don't think they're going to go, or you make it difficult, where's the incentive on you to look after them? Whereas Keystone doesn't tie its lawyers in. It's a non-exclusive agreement. There's a short notice period just to ensure a smooth transition, but effectively they could leave the next day. There are no restrictions on the clients they bring to the firm. So there's nothing to stop our lawyers, all of them, going tomorrow. It's a partnership. Mm-hmm. It's a relationship at will. And therefore, in terms of looking after them, you have to look after them well. And you can't just say, well, I'm doing a great job today. You've got to look at ways in which you could do a better job tomorrow. So the team's focus is not just looking after the lawyers, but looking for ways in which we could improve that support. So ET will get all of that reassurance. But separately, I talk about Keystone as providing lawyers with an incredible opportunity, because they are not coming to the firm on their own, or when they join the firm, they won't be on their own. with all the infrastructure around them, they'll be surrounded by 400 entrepreneurial colleagues, colleagues who are like-minded, colleagues who want to help that new joiner, who that new joiner will want to get to know, because he'll have clients that have a whole variety of needs, so they can properly monetize the needs of all of their clients for all their legal requirements, because the expertise across the firm is huge. And the opportunity is realized by all the initiatives that we drive to bring those lawyers together and to help them get to know one another. And sort of going back to the point we were discussing earlier about COVID, how firms have adopted remote working. What I think law firms haven't done very well is to continue to build a culture, to build collegiality, build collaboration amongst those lawyers working remotely, other than to say, come into the office. Well, we've never had that office that everybody comes into. So we have always understood to build culture, to encourage collegiality, to build collaboration. You have to help those lawyers get to know each other. And it's far better to do that at great events outside of the firm than sitting in an office where everyone's working. Mm-hmm. So that's where I go back to the hosting of lunches and drinks and golf days and skiing holidays and a whole extraordinary range of fun events to bring those lawyers together. And that generates amazing opportunity for lawyers who come to the firm, both to refer clients out, but to receive work themselves from those same colleagues. So ET gets amazing support and he gets extraordinary opportunity by working around familiar and friendly and happy lawyers who he gets to know well.
Initially, obviously, when you took on your role at Keystone and started up, getting lawyers in, were there any struggles at attracting self-employed lawyers to get fully immersed in the culture at all? But by nature, a lot of people, self-employed or working remotely. So were there any struggles initially of getting, more of a cohesive unit as a team?
Never been a problem, because we are hugely helped by the fact that the firm attracts entrepreneurial lawyers. I mean, these lawyers who come to Keystone are typically, highly emotionally intelligent. They have built relationships with clients. Those relationships are strong enough, to survive the transition to Keystone. They know their clients well. They're good with people. That's really what I'm trying to say. So the Keystone lawyers are good with people. They understand the value of relationships, and they understand the opportunity if you build relationships with colleagues. And so that, I guess, personality that is common amongst all lawyers creates the driving force, I suppose, towards people coming together and getting to know each other. But it's also aided by the fact that our remuneration model encourages the cross-referral of work. And so if you want to get the most out of Keystone, and these are entrepreneurial lawyers who obviously do want to get the most out of Keystone, it's important to get to know their colleagues, because you're not going to refer a client unless you know and trust the colleague to whom you're making that referral. So that financial opportunity creates a driver to encourage people to get to know each other. And I think the fact that the firm is absent of politics is also important. In conventional firm, politics is everywhere, and in many ways that is works against collegiality. It works against collaboration. It puts up barriers to people getting on and working well together. And if you take politics out of that environment, as happens at Keystone, those barriers fall away and people are much more incentivized, encouraged, and enjoy each other's company. So when they come together, they have fun.
No, definitely. It does sound like a very exciting, obviously a great place to work. But beyond the whole aspect of Keystone, life outside of work, what does that look like for you? And is there anything really that you do to sort of keep sane, just sort of keep fully aware?
Gardening. We better not go back there. Well, I've got 3 kids who obviously keep one busy. They're 16, 14, and 12. So they're good company. So I spend a lot of time with those guys. A lot of gardening, tennis, and golf. Those are my sort of vague passions, and that definitely keeps me sane. I can't describe to you how much pleasure I get from taking a weedy border and making it neat and tidy. And I think maybe coming back to my legal mind, that
Yeah.
the idea of order, or the pleasure one gets from order. And I think it's called mindfulness, isn't it? When you clear your mind of all worries and pressures and stresses and focus on getting out those nasty little weeds.
I mean, being a former lawyer like yourself, and sort of being in recruitment and having 3 children, especially at the early teenage years, is that sort of a struggle mixing balance of a career and children? Are there certain things that you need to sort of make more important and put aside?
Well, I think I'm very lucky to have a good balance between those things. Before COVID, I moved to Somerset a few years ago. Before COVID, I spent 5 days a week in London, away from the family. And in truth, I suppose at the time you don't question it, you just do it. It's all I'd ever done since moving down to Somerset. Having COVID, of course, enabled that to have a break. And I was at home, 15 months or so before I then ventured back into London. And since COVID, I now do 3 days in London. So I come up on Tuesdays, back on Thursdays. And that feels like a really good balance. It's a good balance in terms of being able to spend some really quality time in the office, working hard, meeting lots of great candidates, and then being able to work from home. And when at home, being able to spend more time with the family. So it's a great balance. But it's an important thing for all of us, I think, to question whether or not we have the right balance in our lives. And it's so easy to ignore that question and be caught on a kind of treadmill that seems normal to you because you're around lots of people on the same treadmill and your world is familiar and seems normal. It's important for all of us, I think, to step off and objectively look at our lives and question whether or not we're happy. I actually read a brilliant book written by a friend of mine called The Modern Maverick, which almost could have been written for Keystone Lawyers, I think. But my mate, he's a guy called Ed Haddon, is a life coach. And the book is all about finding the right balance and changing things if you're not happy. And I think that part of the theme of the book really is what is success? What does success look like to you? And I think success is subjective. It should be, but we all have a kind of objective view of success. That person's got a big house, driving a fast car, going on amazing holidays, etc., etc. They are successful, but of course that's not what success is. Success is whether you're happy, I think, at the end of the day. And I read another brilliant book over the summer called A Shepherd's Life by a guy called James Rebanks. And he's a hill farmer, and it's about his life as a hill farmer. But the last line of the book, which really struck me, which was, "This is my life. I want no other." And to me, it was the perfect expression of contentment and happiness. And I think that if you find the right balance in your life, you can agree with that statement. And if you've got the wrong balance in your life, then you disagree with that statement. This is my life. I want another one. It strikes me as someone who hasn't got the right balance, but I feel very lucky to have struck the right balance.
Being a lawyer in general, especially a corporate lawyer, whether it be at a top 200, a Magic Silver, a US firm, is quite an on-task, a very demanding job. So what sort of advice or things that you can recommend for people in that industry to do to maybe, what can they do to cool down? And maybe if that's spending time with family, what are the best ways to really just sort of take a breather from work?
Well, there are some people who love work, who want to work hard, and that's their life, and they want no other.
Yeah.
They want to work long hours, and that is what success looks like to them. And I sort of go back to what I was saying earlier. I think everybody should question whether or not that's what they want, and if they recognize that they need something different, then they should seek it. They should go out and change their lives. And I think why the book I read resonated so much with me, and in many ways what I do for a living, is because it really does challenge people to question that. And sometimes people ask me what I do, and I say with a wry smile, I change people's lives. And in many ways, I really feel like I do, because people are on that treadmill. They recognize that they're not happy, whether it's because they're working all hours God sends and they're not seeing their family, whether it's because of the politics that exists within their firm, or they're being taken away from what they enjoy doing. And I present them the Keystone offering, which is you dictate, you decide how you want to work and live. And that's going back to that point around flexibility. Keystone offers people the flexibility to get what they're looking for out of their careers, whether it's to work long hours and to build their teams and make lots of money, or whether it's because they want to work 2 or 3 days a week and pursue other things, whether that be spend more time with their family, or whether it's become a non-executive director, or whether it's to be sitting as a trustee on charitable boards. They're also very good things to do, but maybe it's just playing golf or doing more gardening, whatever makes them happy. But to be able to offer them a firm which embraces wherever they might choose to sit on that spectrum when they join us and make that decision as to where they'd like to sit, they're happy. And it is the greatest reward in the world to sit down with somebody who is palpably unhappy for whatever reason, for them to join Keystone and then to catch up with them 6 months later and to see them genuinely look younger, to see them smiling and happy, and for them more often than not to come to me and say, you really have changed my life for the better. What could be a greater reward in terms of what you do for a living than that? And that is, I guess, why I've got such a great passion for doing what I do.
Everyone has their own attitude to working hard and a balance, but beyond everyone else's, beyond Keystone's, give us your definition of a work-life balance and what that looks like.
Well, as I say, it's a very subjective thing. I've talked a bit about what my life looks like in terms of splitting it between work and the life I have outside of work, and for me that balance is perfect. I wouldn't want to work any less, and in many ways I wouldn't want to work any more. Don't tell the boss that. Hopefully he won't watch this video, but
I think it's very likely he may.
I mean, I work hard and I enjoy the work that I do, but I love the fact that I can blend it when I'm working from home with the other interests that I have, and to me that's what a good work-life balance looks like. But for every individual it's going to be different, and I would just always encourage anybody to think hard about what makes them happy, and to do that thing that does make them happy, and find a balance that makes them happy. I say to my kids, even though they're still not at the age where they're starting to think about careers, but sometimes it's, what are you going to do, or what do you think we might do? And I say, for goodness sake, just follow your passions. Don't worry about money. And so many people sort of go, I want to become a banker, or I want to become a corporate solicitor in a big city firm because they get lots of money. Don't worry about money. Worry about your passions. Do something you love and what inspires you, and the money will follow. You can be a brilliant chef and run a chain of restaurants and make a fortune. You can be, I can't give off the top of my head, you can do anything, you can be, but if money is what you're worried about, you're more likely to find it if you follow your passions. And of course, it's not all about money, as I've hopefully laboured the point a bit too much, but it's about finding the right balance.
No, definitely. I think there's a quote, I'm not sure who said it. It was someone smart, I'm sure, saying that if you love the journey more than the destination, then you'll go further. So it certainly seems like that with...
Very good expression.
With a good work-life balance. Now that it seems to be integrated, obviously every firm, every company has their own take on it, but looking beyond, flexible working, what other changes in the legal industry do you think that's slowly going to start to appear in the next few years?
Well, I think it's some of the habits of the legal industry are so ingrained that I'm not sure we're going to see so much change. As I say, change was forced upon us. Human beings are terrible about accepting change or driving change. We as human beings prefer the status quo. If things are going all right, we'll be okay. and we'll stick with the status quo. Change was forced upon us, of course, by the pandemic, and that's why everyone worked remotely, and everyone said, "Hey, this is good." And they carried on after the pandemic to work remotely. But as you're seeing, people are being encouraged back into the office. People are being forced back into the office by management teams that have a very ingrained sense of how their employees should work. And so effectively, you're beginning to see a reverting to type. And I wouldn't be at all surprised. I mean, everyone sort of talks about, remote working is here to stay. But I wouldn't be at all surprised that in a few years' time, very few firms are enabling it to any great extent. And we'll go back to where we were. But, as I say, Keystone distinguishes itself not simply because the lawyers work remotely, but because of all the flexibility that they can have. So yeah, no, I don't see massive change in the legal industry, which of course is great for us.
What importance do you think it had as the fact that something quite severe like COVID had to really change the legal industry, and before that there wasn't much sort of movement or progression? So what does it really say that, severe events are forcing the legal industry to change and not naturally?
Well, I think, I'm being very general when I talk about the legal industry. Of course, different firms have different policies, approach things differently, some better than others. But I think that without change, you start going backwards. And ultimately, without change, if firms and the industry changes around you, you'll start to fail. I think that there is clearly a demand for flexible working. There is clearly a demand for having more responsibility, more autonomy, more independence, because Keystone, and there are others like Keystone, are the great beneficiaries of those lawyers that are walking away from the status quo. So whilst management teams are continuing to operate as they do, there are lawyers within their firms that don't want to carry on working in a firm that is operating that way and are looking for something different. And Keystone is very much the answer to what they're looking for. And that is what is fueling our growth, and will continue to do so, because there's no doubt that younger generations coming through who are much more entrepreneurial, much more focused about their own personal brand, much more questioning of long hours and the work ethic of big city firms, and want more flexibility, who perhaps are inspired by the idea of a portfolio career. They are challenging the status quo, and they're not going to want to join conventional law firms structured the way they are. They're going to want to join Keystone. That's my belief. And that's why, I said earlier in this interview, we're only at the beginning in terms of where we think Keystone can be, because there's a whole generation of lawyers who I believe are looking at Keystone and saying that one day that's where I want to be. I don't want to be an equity partner in this firm. I want to be a consultant where I have my own equity in my own business, and I want to operate through Keystone. And that's where they're aiming for, rather than going through that typical old-fashioned progression of going through the firm and becoming an equity partner when they're a small cog, they've got no influence of the direction of the firm, despite the fact they're an owner, despite the fact they've invested capital. They've got no really control of how the firm does and how well, as a result, they do.
I'm very excited to move on to the segment part of our podcast. As you know, for those who have watched in the past, we have a segment called Click to Agree, essentially where I read out questions to Mark, more so statements, and he will obviously decide or not whether he agrees or disagrees with them. And then we have a bit of time to go through the reasoning as to why. So I promise you, it's not going to be anything too controversial, too ridiculous that you might get fired for saying. Oh, okay. Well, that's good news then. So the first statement I have for you is that all new lawyers should perform initiation songs?
I suppose it depends what song it should be. I think that's a great idea. I think I'd agree with that. And I can choose the song, I hope.
For every lawyer or for yourself?
Well, I get them to sing the same one, and then I can judge on the basis of the quality and caliber of their singing based on how well they do that song.
Surely everyone will get to pick their favourite one though, because some might be better performing with a personalised song as opposed to. I
think all initiations have an element of trying to embarrass the person you're initiating, isn't it? I thought that was the purpose of it. No, I get them to sing Elton John "Your Song," which I sang at my wedding.
Oh wow! Did you?
I did. Yeah.
I hope. Well, I hope there weren't any few leavers. You still got married after that. I hope. Yeah.
I was already married by the time.
Okay. No escape.
But we've actually got a guy at Keystone who's an ex-King singer, who's won 2 Emmys and a Grammy. I think that's right.
Wow.
So he probably sing that one pretty well. He leads our choir. We've got a choir, the Keystone Choir. Anyway,
wow,
yes, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, all right, perfect. Glad you're all for it, because I think that's a favourite one of mine. Next one is fully remote working is unproductive.
Wow. Well, of course, you'd expect me to disagree wholeheartedly with that statement. I think that no, I don't think at all. I think actually working in office is unproductive. There are so many distractions in the office. Working remotely, you get the work done, and then you probably get the work done far quicker, which gives you some time to go and do some other things. So no, I disagree with that statement. You won't be surprised to hear.
Small firms have a better culture.
Well, I disagree with that too. I think culture is not about the size of the firm; it's about the people within it, and really the focus that a firm gives to trying to develop and encourage that culture. I think the reason why Keystone has such a fantastic culture is because of the type of people we recruit. The fact they're entrepreneurial, but when we look for lawyers, we don't just look for great lawyers; we look for great people. And is the fact that we have such nice, decent, sensible people at Keystone that is enable us to build a fabulous culture. So it's not about the size of the firm, it's about the people within it, of course.
An entrepreneurial mindset is key to becoming a lawyer.
Well, I guess I'd have to disagree with that, because there are plenty of lawyers who are not entrepreneurial but are great lawyers. In conventional firms, you need a mix, of course. You need entrepreneurial lawyers, but you need really technically proficient lawyers, the finders, the minders, and the grinders, as they used to be called. I think certainly if you come to Keystone, you need to be an entrepreneurial lawyer, and that's why it's such a great place to be, because there's such great people within it who are driven and who are ambitious and who are, as I said before, fun, emotionally intelligent, go-getting kind of characters.
And the last one is not too controversial, but lawyers will be driven out by AI.
Ooh, I certainly think quite a lot of lawyers will be driven out by AI. I guess it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I mean, it'll be a rising tide, of course. The more junior lawyers will, I guess, their jobs will be taken first. So perhaps there'll be less lawyers, and perhaps lawyers will learn how to be lawyers in a very different way, which is all about using the AI. But there will always, I think, need to be lawyers who are good with strategy and have emotional intelligence to understand the needs of their clients. And I hope in my lifetime, at least, AI never gets to the point where they can do that.
I hope not. It does seem to be, it's a bit scary the way it's advancing. I think maybe blown out the water a little bit in terms of, how things are getting on. I certainly think, there's still a big need for lawyers.
Well, I guess it goes back to my point. If you're a lawyer that can build relationships and build business, yes, you're a lawyer, but really what makes you unique is your ability, your humanity, and your ability to build those relationships and bring that work in. Because I don't think AI is going to be able to bring work in. So, as I say, it's a very important aspect of being a successful lawyer, is the ability, I think, to win work and build relationships, whether with clients or with your colleagues.
Amazing. Well, just before we wrap up, we have one final question for you, and that's something that we like to ask absolutely everyone, so no stranger to it. It derives from I'm sure you know the series Suits, so I'm not sure if you've watched it or not, but essentially two major characters, Mike and Harvey. Mike is Harvey's associate, Harvey's the partner, and in one episode it gets a bit tense, and Harvey asks Mike, what would you do if you had a gun to your head and your back was against the wall, and Mike has to sort of conjure up an answer to keep his job, essentially. So my question is to you, has there been a point in your life where you felt like your back's against the wall, and what did you do to get out of it?
Well, actually, yes, I had a very difficult experience before I joined Keystone in a firm where it was during the financial crash. The firm was very geared towards commercial property. The deals all fell away, and it created a lot of tension within the partnership at the time, of which I was one. And frankly, I was probably a partner far too early in my career, and it was a difficult situation. My mate, who I referred to earlier, and we left the firm. And how did I deal with it? I suppose the way I dealt with it was dealing with each day as it came. But I think also just thinking to myself, I don't want to ever be in this position again, and recognizing the position I was in, and I suppose the slightly weak position I was in, and that was really around not having perhaps the currency to be able to negotiate a better exit from that firm. Not having the currency as in not having any real clients or any real business. So I suppose what got me through it was a determination that once I had moved on, that I would build my own practice and build my own business so that I had currency, and so that I wouldn't be affected by events, rather than I could dictate those events. Sorry, that's probably a much longer one.
No, it's
than you were expecting.
No, it's a great answer, and certainly
and look at me now.
It's certainly like a really good way to think to leave things off. But really appreciate your time. Just before we wrap up, can we sort of what have you got planned sort of towards the end of the year? Can we expect any good news from Keystone coming out at all?
There's continuous good news out of Keystone. No, I mean it's just a wonderful process of growing a fabulous firm, which gets bigger but never loses its sense of intimacy, never loses its sense of fun, and long may it continue, and I'm sure it will. It's been a wonderful 10 years doing what I've done, and I look forward to continuing to work there and continue to grow the business. So lots of good news to come.
Well, that's really great to hear, and certainly appreciate your time, and definitely appreciate all of you tuning in from home. If you did enjoy this episode, please feel free to give it a good rating. It certainly does help us, certainly. If you are a lawyer, whether that's being interested in getting an appraisal of the market or a confidential discussion, please feel free to reach out to me. That's Zac Green on LinkedIn, or via email, zac.green@fintelligent.co.uk, or similarly, you could reach out to Mark. We'll have his info in the description below. But thanks again so much for your time, and thank you for those watching.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Suit, brought to you by Fintelligent. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, like and leave a review. Every time you do, it helps others find the show. If you're interested in finding out more about Fintelligent and how we can assist you in taking the next step in your legal career or making your next exciting hire, head over to fintelligent.co.uk. Join us next time for more insightful conversations on Beyond the Suit podcast.